Okay, all right, we're gonna continue with where we left off. Hopefully, well, we're talking about this God. Well, we're talking about being in quarantine and how what was the thought process? Whatever a man think of, so shall he be. So, in the midst of the quarantine, what was your thought process about? In other words, what was allowed to come into your environment? Was it enlightenment or was it entertainment? Entertainment is going to be based of anything that's going to be full of kill, steal, and destroy, right? Um, and everything's going to be enlightenment is going to be about righteousness, joy, and peace. So whatever that you was meditating on or in the company of is what you're going to become when this quarantine is lifted, and you're going to be able to exercise that. In other words, whatever that you are is going to come out of you, and it's going to be produced to the world. That's why there's going to be a great division on the earth, and people have seen it because the reason why people are seeing demonstration of that division because it was spoken. Like evil or death was spoken or love was spoken. So therefore, it's a war. It always will be a spiritual war. Now, the focus of death or the focus of fear is to get you to get it off of the domain or off the domain that is the actual level that is on. In other words, place it on flesh and blood. Place it on uh, male versus female or black versus white or rich versus poor or this versus that. But it will always be the reason why those categories are against each other because there is it's hidden in plain sight. Like they are actually it's a spiritual war. Everything that is invisible, everything that is visible came from in what was once invisible. So everything that you were arguing about or we're debating about or even what we're siding with came from an invisible aspect. So the enemy wants us to focus on things that is not things that are seen instead of versus things that are not seen. And the only way you can focus on things that are not seen if you can hear the voice of God. Now the enemy wants to take us through the dark dimension, or in other words, he wants to take us through the spiritual world and through an illegal portal, which would be through a dark dimension. In other words, you still becoming a god of your own eyes and everything, and you get there. Now, this is where intoxication comes. This is where hallucination comes. This is where all these different avenues how to go into the spiritual world, how to leave the natural. But they all those ways are in violation to the actual spiritual dimension. So not only are you going illegally, but you actually inhabit or you harbor illegal things upon you. That's why you come out worse than you were before. But you would say, but the spirit that's inside of you said that you came out better because the only thing, if you notice what will come out of you after going to a dimension illegally, you will come out and where it's more about you. It's more about you, and with a confession, you will say it's not about you. You will say, "I love, I do this." If you are anything of good, if you are anything that you're saying that you are, you will never have to say it. You will never have to justify yourself. Your walk, your actions, your lifestyle, your spirit, everything about you speaks for itself. You don't even want the praise of what you do, because that's how much of against it that you are of being a god in your own eyes. How much of against it you are. You don't try to. You just is. But the effects of that you have been going through a legal portal, you harbor those spirits that came through the access of that portal. It becomes all about you. If you hear a person that talks about them like or in a positive way, like, well, I help out people, I do this, I do that, they miss God. They're not in fellowship with God at all. Because if they were, it wouldn't be about them being praised. It would be about God. That's what the whole born again spirit is about. It's not about you. Remember, before we were born again, before the thought of being born again came in, it was man was lost. They was all about themselves. Remember, we were going from the consciousness or the voice of what Satan said that you will become a god in your own eyes. So we're to be born again is to go away from being a god in your own eyes and to giving that sovereignty or that authority to someone we feel that is worthy. That's going to lead us to what? To righteousness, joy, and peace. But not into love. I mean, not to kill, steal, and destroy. Not to where anything that's going to be of destruction. So this is how we get. I mean, going back to this, in the midst of being in the quarantine, what were our thought process based upon? Now, this quarantine thing is about to be lifted, but from this point on, what you're gonna Surround yourself with, and all these different avenues or different ways as far as like of knowledge or information or thoughts, which basically what knowledge is just spirits. So wherever you're going to go or wherever that you're going to be a part of is going to be actually have an avenue or access to come inside of you. It's an invitation. Wherever you go is an invitation to that environment to come inside of you to be one. Wherever that you go is an invitation or for the environment wherever you go to be a part of you. And whatever that you think about, that's what the whole whatever you think about is going to be in the is going to be the atmosphere where you came from. And whatever you think about, so shall you be. And whatever you be, you're God. And God created you in this aspect. This is how you are a God, that you could death and life is in the power of the tongue. You can either say something that's going to be, in other words, your roots could be connected to things of above, where the very voice of God had you and you were talking to him, and he transformed you in the image of his son. And that comes out of you, or you're going to be an opposite of that. You're going to do everything in spite of that. In other words, you're not going to like deliberately try to say I'm against Jesus, but everything that Jesus stood for, you're going to be walking against. It's just how it goes. It just is the atmosphere, or the the atmosphere where you go or whatever is an invitation what you're going to allow to come inside of you. So with that being said, my people of faith, oh, before we close, let's go here. Uh, the blessed never works for money. Why? Because work is of Satan. Work is to remind you of the punishment of the disobedience. In other words, as parents, I don't know if anybody ever experienced this as a child, but well, my mom, if I didn't do something that she asked me to do, and I didn't do it, I was punished. So it would be a moment of time out. I couldn't go outside. I couldn't do this, whatever. But of course, she would buckle down on the rules and she would allow me to do it. But bless her heart, But anyway, I see the gist of it. That the point of it is to think about what you did so you won't do it again. So man is working the dust of the ground to think about what they did, so they won't do it again. So somebody say, well, so they won't do it again. How can we redo what Adam did? Jesus did it for us. So if you can and get to that place where you can accept Jesus, you no longer walk in the walk of Adam, or you no longer are in the punishment of Adam. So therefore you don't have to work for money. So a person said, what do you work for? How do you get your work? That's the point. If Jesus if you accept Jesus, the Father is now your security. Now that means you can listen to the Father, and the Father will tell you the Father could go tell you, go on the corner, tap your right foot 7 times, and everything that you would need for resources would be there. You wouldn't be in disbelief because there's no fear. Why there's no fear? Because the voice of Satan is no longer allowed to talk to you. Why? Because you walking you following the voice of Jesus, which is the Holy Spirit, right? So with that being said, you won't have to work for money because God is your source. You don't have to fear how this is going to happen or what's going to happen because God is showing you. God will walk with you and talk with you, and every time you walk in obedience to Him, the blessing comes because it goes like this: the abundance equals obedience. Obedience equals quantity. Abundance is one seed, and that abundance is the obedience. So if you can obey God, in other words, if you can hear God, you have the blessing. All you have to do is walk it out. So let's anything else on here that we missing? Let's see. The blessed never works for money because if they're blessed, they can hear God, and if you hear God, you have everything that you need because God will show you. God, you don't have no reason to fear if God will or will not do. That's all what fear is. You become a wanderer. You become lost in the thoughts of like how, when, where, what, and why. You become lost in that, and all that. When you surrender to Jesus, and He really transforms, and when His Spirit comes inside of you, you become transformed, and they'll no longer be your consciousness of thought. You become assured. Like, in other words, the Holy Spirit will begin to tell you to go do stuff. And this how you know you're transformed because it will be some of the things that you know that it will be the very thing that the enemy will say you don't have to do. That's how you know that you transform. The very enemy comes up and oppose that that I don't want to call it a command, but that assignment. There it is. Thank you, Holy Spirit. The enemy will come to oppose the assignment. God can literally tell you and say you got $1 left and say go take this dollar and go do this with it. The enemy immediately come to oppose that and say like don't do that because what if you do what's going to happen to you? How would you do this? That's all the enemy. But if you listen to Jesus, if you've been walking with the Father, that means you've been walking with the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit would say don't listen to that. Cast that thought down. Get rid of that thought. God will not God will. God will. And it becomes that thing where you walking out on that voice, which is the walk of faith. And therefore, now you don't have to worry about anything because God is a man of you understand at that point he have proven to you that he is a God of his word because you walked out and you saw him do that. With that being said, there is no reason for the blessed to ever work because they no longer have to serve the punishment anymore. They back home. And if you're back home, you're no longer doing the works of Satan. All right, the works of Satan is where hurt, harm, and danger is. And the hurt, harm, and danger, everything of that, all it does is that is a punishment. And that reminds you of the sin, of what you did to be put in that position. Every time you get caught doing something you're not supposed to do, is going to remind you of why you did it. Why? Because the devil is the devil is accuser. He is the accuser of the brother. He will constantly. This is what the enemy will do. The enemy will lead you or tempt you. Let me say this: the enemy will tempt you to do wrong just so he can be able to torment you later. The moment that you take his bait or take his offering, so he can have the privilege to go inside your soul and torment you. In other words, to constantly to tear you down, to condemn you for what you did. You did this. You shouldn't have did that. Why you do this? And then all of a sudden he will have all these different people that he can talk to. They will come to you and they will remind you about what you did. That's torment. That's why coming to Jesus, whatever, it gives us the Holy Spirit. And the only way you can get, it give you the Holy Spirit leads us back to the Father. So the Father is our covering. We don't have to be in fear. We don't have to be without ever again. Once again, let's go here. Obedience is the abundance. Obedience is quantity, or obedience equals quantity. The enemy will say obedience is not. It does not equal equality. It does not equal. The enemy will say obedience does not equal quantity. It will actually say it will have you to lose. What about you? That's the enemy talk. You got to get rid of that voice. That means you got to have to humble yourself, and until you're ready to humble yourself, you're gonna work. All right, let's go here. Because the enemy, as long as hurt is there, there's no reason for you to have hope. In other words, that kills possibility. Now, the reason why you are in fear because you think everything is impossible to be done, or impossibility has authority inside your soul. But it works like this: Jehovah throne sits in impossibility, because impossibility is fear. This is why Jesus said, have no fear, I overcome the world. I overcame everything the enemy, I overcame every thought that can tell you that it cannot be, or it won't be, or that it's impossible. Jesus said, I overcame that. Just follow my voice. Who is the voice of Jesus? The Holy Spirit. But how can you receive the Holy Spirit? You can't receive the Holy Spirit until you submit to the Father. How do you submit to the Father? By receiving his Son. Read what Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is talking about. Even if you want to go through the letters of Paul, what Paul was talking about how Jesus is. If you can receive Jesus, what he did. What Jesus did was he took us away from the enemy. He destroyed the works of the enemy. But he can't destroy the works until the enemy. Well, put it like this: it's not evidence to that individual till they no longer hear fear anymore. Fear is not like. Fear could be demonstrated, and this is an act of torment versus fear itself. Fear is actually a voice that will always lead you to go where hurt, harm, and danger is. That's through, like I said, through social media. That's through video or images. That's through radio. That's through conversations. It doesn't matter what the outlet is. It's always going to be where hurt, harm, and danger is. And if you notice, that's what the music is playing. everything about destruction, about hurt, harm, and danger. Everything about kill, steal, and destroy. With that being said, we're going to bring this video to a close. All right, my people of faith, you are the blessed. Let's be the blessing. Let's keep walking.